Tull moved and grew at a furious pace. From their early beginnings playing pubs and small clubs, by the 1970s they were selling records by the truckload and become one of the biggest concert draws on the planet. Part of this success was down to the vision and the songwriting genius of Ian Anderson, but also the incredible work ethic of Anderson and the rest of the band. But there's another component I feel was very important in Tull's success. Was their achievements, especially in those early years, in the pop singles charts. These singles brought Tull to a much wider audience, whereas the other UK progressive giants of that time, King Crimson, Yes, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Pink Floyd, Genesis, BC before Collins, might have the occasional charting single. They had nothing on Jethro Tull. Like I say, these songs brought Tull to a much wider audience, especially in the UK and around Europe and later on in America. Here in the UK, back in the late 60s, early 1970s, we had one music programme, the primetime Top of the Pops, which was a top 40 show. To appear though on Top of the Pops pretty much guaranteed you good sales and brought you to a much larger audience, around 8 million viewers per show. So let's have a look at the bizarre history of Jethro Tull, pop icons. July 1968, the band released Song for Jeffrey from their first album, This Was. It's a wonderful slice of psychedelic blues, featuring great interplay between Mick Abrams on slide guitar and Ian Anderson on harmonica and vocals. Very much Captain Beefheart territory. Probably not the most commercial song ever, but the New Musical Express here in the UK thought it was good enough to be a hit. On the 29th of November 1968, we received the single Love Story. At the time, I remember this came out of the blue. We'd all heard those stories about Mick Abrams leaving the band being in turmoil, and the search for a replacement, which turned out to be Tony Iommi for 2 weeks. Then along came Martin Barr, but that's another story. I always felt Love Story was kind of shoved out to say, yeah, we're going through a bit of turmoil at the moment, but it's all cool. The song is a move away from the blues, jazz, rhythm and blues of This Was, and into what you could call the beginnings of that classic Jethro Tull sound. Folky acoustic interludes contrasting with the heavier rock blues sound. For me, it was the B-side of the single that I loved the most. Virtually a solo outing for Ian Anderson, the song was a Christmas song. Ian's biting, sarcastic put down of the hypocrisy that surrounds the festive season. Although Love Story only reached number 29 in the UK, it did hang around for over 8 weeks. Living in the Past, May 1969. This is a beauty. So the story goes that Terry Ellis, Tull's manager, says to Ian, while they're on tour in the USA, can he knock something out, a hit single, about 3 minutes long? Terry is worried that the fans back in the UK might lose interest in the band, them being on tour in America for so long. So Ian, winding Terry up, says, yeah, give me an hour and I'll come up with a hit single. So about an hour later, Ian comes back with the most uncommercial song he could write. Its title, Living in the Past, was very untrendy. About as untrendy as you could get. And it was written in 5/4 time. So you couldn't dance to it. A complete no-no back then for a hit single. But to Ian's surprise, Terry loved it and booked a studio for it to be recorded immediately. That uncommercial song raced up the UK charts and hit the dizzying heights of number 3. That summer of 1969, it was played endlessly on the radio. Ian Anderson. Although when we did do Living in the Past a couple of times on Top of the Pops, I do remember on one occasion dear old Cliff Richard standing and warming up for his slot on another stage in the studio, attempting to dance along. I remember watching him and thinking, this is not going to be easy, Cliff. It's quite difficult to follow 5/4 unless you've got 2.5 legs. I do remember Cliff coming out soon after that Top of the Pops appearance and saying that Ian Anderson was one of the most intelligent men he'd ever met in the music business. And good old Terry was bang on the money. Living in the past did keep the momentum going. For when Tull's next album, Stand Up, was released, it came out in July that year, it went straight to the top of the album charts. So, Tull's next single was their jazzed up take of the famous Bach piece, Beret, and as far as I remember, it was never released in the UK, only in Europe, and it became a hit in Belgium, Germany, and reached number 5 in Holland. October 1969, Sweet Dream. This, like Love Story and Living in the Past, Sweet Dream was another standalone single, and it was an absolute classic in my book. An ominous driving guitar riff, augmented by a wonderful orchestral arrangement by David Palmer, while Glenn Cornick's bass used to threaten to blow my speakers back in the day. And the way the band just drop out and leave Ian's 12-string acoustic guitar, this is pure genius. It's difficult to see where this would have fitted in on Stand Up or Benefit, but I always wanted back in the day, I always wished that Tull would do more songs like this, really rocking out with a great brass section. Sweet Dream reached number 7 on the UK charts, and these standalone singles were definitely doing their job, because in between the albums you had something else, you had something else to go and buy, something else to go and listen to, and it definitely kept the interest going. January 1970, The Witch's Promise. This was the first song that featured John Evans on keyboards. John had been sharing a flat with Ian and decided to just join up as a session musician, but eventually Ian persuaded John to become a full-time member of the band. Again, Ian Anderson with always one eye on the future, knowing if the band were to progress musically that the addition of a keyboard player would be vital. John's impact can immediately be heard on A Witch's Promise, playing piano and one of the very few Tull tracks that feature mellotron. John also contributes organ to the B-side, The Classic Teacher. Just take a listen to Glenn Cornick's wonderful bass playing on this track. Sweet Dream reached number 4 in the UK and was a massive success all around Europe. When Tull came to perform the song on Top of the Pops, Anderson's appearance and performance raised some controversy in the UK. He looked like he just wandered in from the cover of Aqualung. He was leering, bug-eyed, twitching, looking like he was completely off his head, which was not the case. My father, God bless him, actually walked out of the room in disgust. But years later, when flicking through his record collection, I found a Jethro Tull's Greatest Hits album with, yes, you guessed it, The Witch's Promise on it. I guess all that Tull being played in the house did have somewhat of an effect. Ian Anderson said this song was intended to be the last standalone single from the group, a song that was not taken from an LP. Anderson said the group would issue singles from future albums in order to gain radio play, but he was not interested in promoting them. Anderson was true to his word, and the next single was Inside from the Benefit album. Inside might have got the band some radio play, but it didn't grace any of the charts around the world. Now, I don't know if Ian's decision was to stop these standalone singles because he felt so much pressure to come up with new material, and he just wanted a break from all that because he's mentioned the pressure he was under. There's songs on Stand Up, there's the Drive-In song, so maybe that was a reason why he stopped doing these standalone singles. For it was almost a year later we finally got Aqualung, and after all the years of touring, all the hard work, the groundwork and unshakable belief, Tull cemented their place as one of the major rock bands on the planet. Aqualung sold millions and was a huge success with the fans and the critics, even though Ian, right up to the very day of the launch of the album, was unsure of how Aqualung was going to be received. 2 songs were released off of Aqualung as singles. One was Locomotive Breath and the other was Hymn 43. Ian Anderson. Locomotive Breath is about the runaway train of population growth and capitalism. It was based on those sort of unstoppable ideas, We're on this crazy train. We can't get off it. Where's it going? Well, hymn 43 he describes as a blues for Jesus. Both songs hit the lower reaches of the American charts and received considerable airplay, pushing album sales to well over 3 million copies in the United States. Creatively, the band were on a roll, and we couldn't wait for the next instalment in the Tull story, and it arrived on the 3rd of September 1971 as an EP, an extended player, Life's a Long Song, which featured 5 new songs, so it kind of felt like a mini album. So you got the elegant, swirling title track, and I love the way the band adds layers of instrumentation verse by verse. You've got Up the Pool, Ian's tribute to Blackpool, the seaside town of his youth, the dark, brooding Dr. Bogenbroom, the jazzy, proggy From Later, which kind of hints a little at the direction that the band would be taking a few short months down the line, and the beautiful Nursey, which would have fitted in wonderfully on Aqualung. So that's part 1. In part 2, we'll look at the singles. Yes, the singles from Thick as a Brick and A Passion Play, and how Tull's early single success helped them sell millions of albums in the 1970s. Take care, see you soon.